Well, thank you, Miss Computer Lady. If you haven't already guessed, it is us, the Noise Brigade. I'm Bobby. He's Tom. And today we're going to discuss Philly sports heroes. So, the last show we did, we talked about the negative because for some reason we always seem to lead with the negative. Um, is that the Philly in us, Tom?
I think so. I think that's why, like several episodes ago, we started with the worst.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah.
So, I mean, just one of those things that obviously the pessimist side comes out first. So, of course, you're always going to think about the worst. But
Negative.
then things flip, and you're like, let's talk about the good stuff.
Right. So we're gonna get away from Negadelphia for a little bit. We're gonna talk about some all-time Philly greats, some all-time legends, um, guys that will never ever have to buy a meal or a drink or pretty much anything in Philly for as long as they live. A couple of them are actually deceased, so obviously that's another story. But anyway,
So
without
you're talking
further,
about guys like Jason Worth, right?
yeah. How the how? Wow, I almost dropped an F bomb right off the bat. How the heck did we miss friggin' Jason Worth?
I don't know. We won't get too much into him. Let's. I say we'll table him, and we'll
All
do
right.
a worst part two
Yeah.
because we had some other ones we thought of.
Yeah.
But yeah, I
It'll,
jest.
it'll be called the Jason Worth episode.
Yes, that's perfect. But
But
you did most of the notes on this one, and I'm gonna kind of ride your coattails here. I have a few notes and of my own, and some players I thought about that fall into that Philly sports heroes category. And the one thing too is most of these people that we're going to talk about here, people that played in Philly maybe for an extended period of time, but not necessarily finished their career yet in Philly. Um, they were traded or they end up signing somewhere else, or something just happened. But no matter what, like you said, they come back to town and it's like standing ovation.
right.
So not all these guys, some are still active, and some might actually still be playing in
Yeah.
Philly. So, but yeah, these are our heroes. And go ahead, man. What do we got? Who are we going to kick this off with?
All right. So we're gonna start this one off with the original Big E, Eric Lindros. So he easily could have been on our zeros list um, to start, but as someone who redeemed himself. And the reason I say that because I say that through the lens of a young person who was way too influenced by 610 WIP at the time, which was the sports talk station.
WIP.
Jesus, I remember that jingle too. I remember listening to it on crappy AM radio in my dad's car. Um, but the biggest thing that I remember from being younger and having this situation happen is, Lindros kept on getting hurt. And then and this is the part, and I looking back, I was wrong. I was 100% wrong. He was 100% right. Um, but his parents were his agent.
Right.
So a lot of it seemed like it was just this dude that didn't know how to handle his stuff, and so he was having mommy and daddy do stuff for him. And I think that's the way that Bobby Clark looked at it, which Bobby Clark looked at it completely the wrong way, because Bobby Clark is the one who's responsible for blowing up that relationship. Um, the organization didn't do right by Lindros at all. The medical staff, I mean, hell, Keith Jones tells a story about how he came into the hotel room that he was sharing with Lindros after a game, and I can't remember where they were playing. And but he came in and Lindros was in the bathtub like gray and having difficulty breathing. And the Flyers medical staff told him to get on a plane and fly to Montreal with the team. And he was like, no. And Keith Jones got him to the hospital. And it's good that he got him to the hospital because he would have died.
Mm.
dude would have died. He had a punctured lung. He broke a rib. It punctured his lung. His lung was collapsed and it was filling up with blood. Like he legit would have died if he would have followed the medical staff's advice and just got on the plane and flew to Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And it if you look at the track record throughout that time while he was with the team, it was that kind of situation, not that extreme, but it was those kind of situations over and over where people were on him because he was playing with a concussion. There were times when he took the tests and failed concussion tests, and they didn't tell him because they needed him to play. So they let him play with concussion symptoms. And so these people just did not have any of his well-being in mind at all. They just it was ridiculous. And looking back and seeing it now, when it all went down, I was pissed because he was talking bad about the organization. He was talking bad about the team. He was talking bad about Bobby Clark. But at the end of the day, man, he was 100% right.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know,
No. And my thing with him, and I was always more of a, and this, and I think I've kind of made it clear here when we record, much more into the Phillies and Eagles than anything else. But I remember Lindros, coming in, and he was like the guy. You know what I mean? He was it. Especially in terms of early '90s Flyers. Oh my goodness! I
right?
mean, he to me that was like, oh my god. And I'm not again. I'm not comparing this, but to me is the 9, 10-year-old is like, we got somebody that could be the next Gretzky.
Right.
I'm not saying that he turned out to be, just making that assumption as a 9-year-old, that we've got this awesome guy coming through. And, from what you just explained, this was one of those things that, yeah, years ago, it was kind of like, not really sure about this guy, after a while. But then, yeah, the team just did him wrong. And yeah, I'm with you on this. Like this guy, yeah, he could have fit on our zeros list, but totally redeem yourself.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, and that's the thing, dude. And coming into it's funny you mentioned Gretzky because Gretzky was the great one. Well, Lindros coming out, his nickname was the next one,
Hmm.
and he was basically he was, if you could distill the '80s into a hockey player, that's what Gretzky was. Gretzky was finesse. Gretzky was, you know, he was everything that the '80s as a decade would be as a hockey player with way less coke. All right. Lindros was the '90s distilled into a hockey player. He was big, he was physical, he would just bowl you over, man. He was polar opposite of Gretzky, whereas Gretzky would get calls made for him because he was the great one. He was the king on the ice. Lindros, people would take runs at him and he would get penalties because he was such a big dude and he was so strong. And he was just, if he could have stayed healthy, man, I shudder to think of what he would have done. He was more now I will say he was more in the mold of a Mario Lemieux um, than a Wayne Gretzky because of the physicality and everything, and he was more predicated on goal scoring, whereas Gretzky ended up trending. He scored an S ton of goals, like there you can't deny that. But towards the
Right.
end of his career, like when he was playing and and Lindros were playing at the same time, Gretzky had kind of positioned more into a playmaker role, and he was
Right.
he was getting a lot of his points from assists instead of from goals. And dude, Lindros, he was so fun to watch. He was just everything about him was just over the top, outrageous. I mean, he wasn't that off the ice that we know of. Obviously, it was a different time, so um, but I knew people who were close to him, and he was going out and having fun, but he wasn't being like super duper crazy, you know, like I said, much less coke than you would imagine.
Right.
Um,
And again, you made a good point earlier too. He was young, very young. breaking in, I believe, what, 18.
Yeah.
And so, and if you look at it now, the guy's only 48 years old.
Right.
So he's very young now, and he retired. What, gosh, it's been what, 13 years, 14 years now.
2008, 2007 or 2008. I can't remember.
Yeah, 13. Yeah, I know it's 13, 14 years. But yeah, and big guy, right? 6'4", 240.
Yeah.
Was like billed as, and yeah, definitely one of those that I think, look back on, and for that time, and if he would have stayed healthy, no telling what would have happened there. But for that first several years there, my goodness, you're talking about one of the best players of all time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And just to finish it up, one of the comparisons I put in here is, if our parents had Bobby Clark, he was their quintessential flyer. Eric Lindros was our quintessential flyer. If I can talk, Jesus.
That's a
Um,
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
and one little fun fact that I'm going to throw out there is he and his wife are friends with Kirk Douglas, or no, not Kirk Douglas. Who's Kurt Russell? Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn.
No kidding.
Yeah, they actually
Hmm.
have a cabin together in Canada. I can't remember where in Canada, but somewhere, and they go hang out there. Their
Wow,
families go hang out.
imagine what it'd be like to hang out with Snake Plissken. Huh.
Dude, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Like, and here we are. We're so stupid. Goldie Hawn, who was considered one of the most beautiful women of her time, and we're talking about Kurt Russell,
Yeah.
Captain Ron himself.
It's a fair point.
What was his name in Big Trouble in Little China?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Put me on a spot like that, and I can't remember.
I mean, he'll always be Snake Plissken.
Yeah, Snake Plissken. Yeah.
So we'll just go with that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah. Let's move off of Eric here. This next one, man, I want you to go through, because I know for a fact, this guy, if I were putting money on someone said, all right, who is Bobby's all-time favorite Philadelphia athlete, and I just had to come up with, a person off the top of my head. This next guy is who comes to mind front and center every single time.
and
I'm
you
like,
hit the nail on the head, man. You hit the nail on the head. So next on the list is going to be Brian Dawkins, number 20. He was, if I could build the perfect Philadelphia Eagle, it would be him. If I had to just pick, who to me embodies the Philadelphia Eagles, it's Brian Dawkins. Dude you could never, ever, ever say that he didn't give 100% on the field. He was making plays. He elevated the level of play of every single player on that defense just by being there, because nobody wanted to let him down. You want to talk about an inspirational dude? Watch some of his pregame speeches.
oh,
If it doesn't make you want to run through a wall, I don't know if you have a pulse, because he's ridiculous. And I don't give a crap what anybody says. He played at a time when it was probably the best group of safeties to ever play in the NFL. I would say that's who he played with. And to me, and everybody's going to have their own opinion. To Steelers fans, it's going to be Troy Polamalu. To Ravens fans, it's going to be Ed Reed. Ravens fans. For Niners and Raiders fans, it's going to be Ronnie Lott. No, I don't give a crap. You're all wrong. It's Brian Dawkins, bar none. I have an awesome print that you guys got me framed, hanging on my wall, of him just drawn out of not only just quotes from his speeches, but his stats and everything. He's somebody that I don't have to buy any other jerseys. He was the first Eagles jersey I bought by myself. Like when I had money and I was like, you know what, I need to get an Eagles jersey because I'm tired of walking around in a Charlie Garner jersey with the sleeves falling off. I want a Brian Dawkins jersey. So I went to the store. I went to Modell's in the Deptford Mall and bought a Brian Dawkins jersey and wore it and wore it until the seams started coming apart on the sleeves. And what did I do after that? I went and bought more Brian Dawkins jerseys because you know what? Any other player on that team might turn around and let me down. I know that that dude is never, ever, ever going to let me down. Um, and everything. No one has a bad thing to say about him. The only bad thing I can say about him is not even his fault. I wish he hadn't gone to the Broncos. And
Yeah.
I almost bought a Broncos jersey when he went
Yeah.
to the Broncos.
Yeah. Now, and you make a good point here too at the end that, yeah, I mean, it sucks that he went there and he was still making plays as a Bronco, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not like he was cooked when he left.
No, he was still uh, very, very capable, top of his game. And, you know, Denver at the time was used to having a very good, strong safety position. Um, I mean, because what is a precursor to him coming over was what they had. Hell, they had John Lynch,
Yeah. They had
right?
Steve Atwater for years, and then they had John Lynch.
So I mean, you had some really that fan base knew that coming in, he was going to be something special, and they were used to it, right? From previous players.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hated that he left too. But I mean, it's one of those things that obviously kicking off this episode, it was a free dinner, come back anytime, standing ovation.
Oh, yeah.
It's a it's a no doubter.
And we even talked about going up to Canton for his induction ceremony. Um, Unfortunately, it didn't come together, but that I've never really wanted to go to the Football Hall of Fame as far as for an induction weekend,
Hmm.
but that would have been the one time I really wanted to go.
Yeah, yeah, that would have been cool. And no, definitely as going through some of these players and the ones that we'll get into, he was always the top of my list too. And mainly because what's not to like?
Right.
Because he fit the mold of, and you put a great note on here, hard hitting, hard on his sleeve warrior. That's perfect. It's a great way to describe him. And that in the terms of Philadelphia athletes that are endear themselves to the city, that's pretty much all you have to be.
Right.
Put yourself out there and play the damn game hard. That's it.
And I mean, and he added to it, like there were the theatrics. There was the Wolverine crawl out through the tunnel. The whole Weapon X thing where he actually had a separate locker in the locker room for all his Wolverine stuff, and it had a nameplate that said Weapon X. So he was just he exuded just everything about the city that he possibly could, and I loved it. I loved everything about the way he played the game, and like I said, he never took a play off, and you could see that, and it was evident to anybody who was watching the game. It doesn't matter if you've watched football for 20 years. It doesn't matter if you watched for 2 minutes. When you saw him play the game, you knew he was something special.
Right, right. Staying with the Eagles though. Let's go current. And this one's funny, and the only one that I could think of currently that I would feel in a similar way that you just described Brian Dawkins, and not because this guy has a Super Bowl ring, but
Right.
maybe it's because he wore the most epic outfit ever, um, post Super Bowl victory, and his brother's a pretty good player too, not an Eagle,
No, not an Eagle, but
not an
but
Eagle,
pretty
but
good,
pretty good
pretty good
player
player.
too. Jason Kelsey, my goodness. Yeah, go ahead, man. This
So,
guy's all over it.
dude, so Jason Kelsey, like, all right, let's be real. So in my closet right now, there are, let's see,
Mummer's outfit from Jason Kelsey.
there is a Jason Kelsey Mummers outfit. No, there's trying to think who's hanging it. All right, so I have a couple jerseys. I have a white Brian Dawkins, I have a black Brian Dawkins, I have a black Brian Westbrook, who we'll talk about in a little bit, and then I have a green Jeremiah Trotter, who could be added to this list, and I have
Yeah.
Jason Kelsey. Jason
Nice.
Kelsey's the newest one. Got it for my birthday because I've wanted a Jason Kelsey jersey for years. And he's so growing up, like I had friends that were fans of offensive linemen, and I never really got it. I'm like, nah, I get it that they're important, but why would you want an offensive lineman's jersey? Because and maybe it was partly because a lot of them liked John Runyon, and John Runyon wore number 69, so it was kind of like, but like I knew people would trade Thomas jerseys and stuff like that, and I never really got it. And then I saw Jason Kelsey play, and the things he was doing as a center, as an offensive lineman, where typically you don't know an offensive lineman's name unless they're screwing up, right?
Right.
You know them, they have to be doing one of two things. They either have to be screwing up really bad, or they have to be so good that you have no choice but to notice them. And
Right.
Kelsey was so good, you had no choice but to notice him. And not just because of what he was doing in the trenches, but this dude moved like a tight end. He was downfield. There were plays where, Shady McCoy or whoever they, was the running back at the time, would be downfield and somebody's blocking and you think, oh man, the tight end got downfield quick, or wide receiver. That's a big dude for a wide receiver. That's not a wide receiver. That's Jason Kelsey, because he would get out of the trenches, get from the center of the field down the field, and be making lead blocks for the running back. And his athleticism and how he played are just insane. And he's still doing it to now. He hasn't. I don't even want to mention it because I don't want to jinx him. I'm not going to say nothing more about it. But dude is he's on another level. And, you know, that for me is the scariest thing about this current Eagles team. There's a lot of scary things about this current Eagles team, but I don't know how they replace him when he retires.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think that's the problem, because he recently signed a new contract, and thankfully so, with the Eagles, so he's here for a bit longer. But who's next? And that's the kicker. I don't know that these guys, in the grand scheme of things, get revered as much as quarterback, or the running back that makes all the flashy plays, or the wide receiver that tears up and gets 10 catches for 200 yards. You know, these linemen never get the love and the things that you just described, right?
Right.
They don't get it. He does. And there's very few, as you mentioned, unless you're really just like, oh my God, why are they still playing? Because they just they can't snap the ball. Um, Guys that off the offensive line that you can even name off the top of your head, and I even think about that at times, and I'm like, the ones that come to mind, hell, they're not Eagles, you
Right.
know they're not, John Runyon, yeah, I mean, whatever, but you get some random guys here and there, but yeah, Kelsey's on a different level.
Yeah.
Different level.
And I mean, and that's besides the whole Super Bowl uh Super Bowl speech. I mean, if you're an Eagles fan and you saw that speech, if you're first of all, if you're an Eagles fan, you have seen the speech. You have. There's just no way around it. And then singing the song and everything, just everything, man. He has taken to this city so well, and he's just kind of embraced everything about it, and to the point where he knows who the mummers are and dressed up like one.
Right.
So dude
And
dude gets it.
yeah, and you make a good point. This will be a good segue into the next person. And just in overall, we'll hit this point. There are certain times, whether it's one play, one speech, just a moment in time, where an athlete, and in particular these ones that we're talking about for Philly, that will forever endear themselves to the city. Him, for the overall populous fan base, will always remember him post Super Bowl victory wearing the Mummers outfit. That's it.
Oh
And
yeah.
giving a speech of a lifetime. And speaking of a speech of a lifetime, this next guy breaking away from the football world into baseball. And here, it's funny. We could sit here and actually the next few are going to be off the same, era, but really they all won the World Series ring together. So we could sit here and we were talking pre-recording here about the '93 Phillies, which we'll get into a little bit. You could do the same thing for about the '08 Phillies.
Oh yeah.
But speech wise, it came from Mr. Chase Utley. And they weren't the world champions, Bob. They were the
world champions.
That's right.
And I'm not going to say it because I'm trying to keep this a family show.
Yeah, my goodness. This guy, you want to talk about somebody that came out and played like a Philly fan expects the person to play? Oh my goodness.
Right.
I don't think I ever saw a person or a player that just did not ever put 100% into everything. And that was Utley to me. I mean, he was, yeah.
He's the Phillies equivalent to me of Brian Dawkins.
That's a great way to put it.
And he'll forever be, well, I mean, I won't say forever, but he's my favorite Philly of all time. And not just for the sound bites, like in the All-Star game in New York when everybody booed him because when it was at the Mets Stadium and everybody was mad because they thought that he hurt who was it, David Wright or whoever the heck they said it was a dirty slide.
Was it the slide in the second base? Or
Yeah. It wasn't David Wright. Who was that? Was it Reyes?
Might have been Reyes, yeah.
Yeah, but in any event, and the camera's on him, and he hears them booing. He goes, "Boo, F you!" Like, just he had a penchant for dropping F-bombs on live TV, which is great. But no, man, he every single play, dude was just going for it. He was playing like his hair was on fire. He would run through a wall if that's what it took to get his team a win. And like I said, much in the same vein as Brian Dawkins, like he did not know what it meant to not give 100% at all times. And you have to admire it. You have to. If you've ever played a sport, that's what was great about Dawkins. That's what's great about Chase Utley, is if you ever played a sport, they played the game at the professional level the way we like to think that we would play if we made it to their level.
Right. And the one sad thing about him was, and you mentioned this in your notes, toward the end of his tenure with the Phillies, he had some really bad knee issues that just, he had to go through some pretty crazy therapy and the different things to try to just even get back on the field.
Right.
And that was a kind of a killer for him. And really at his, end of his time in Philly and, reason why he, ends up with the Dodgers. But, it just really was such a great person to have, as basically, always had his foot on the pedal. Never, and we'll kind of skip around here, but you have a great note about his shortstop for most of his tenure in Philly. Outside of the random, if he's out or whatever.
Right.
Jimmy Rollins, who, here's the funny thing. If I were to, be asked the question of who's my all-time favorite Philly or even Philly sports athlete, this is a hard one for me to beat. And it's funny because he was the polar opposite at times.
Yeah.
Because he, very famously didn't run out, some plays and got called out by good old Charlie, didn't he?
Yes, he did. He got called out by me when they were playing so the year after they won the World Series in 2009, we took my dad up to Tampa to go see a Rays and Phillies game. which we got destroyed. Um, and Jimmy didn't run out of play. And I think I remember posting on social media at the time because Chan Ho Park came in and sucked. And I put something about like, yeah, you know what? Jimmy Rollins and Chan Ho Park can walk back to Philly after this. And like, I was screaming at him though. I was screaming at him in the stadium, but people were looking at me like I was an idiot. Which I mean, maybe they're right, but
I absolutely loved him, and I'll never forget 2007. As much as I always sit on 2008, 2007, I'll never forget 7 games down, 17 left to play. And, he had declared that they were the team to beat in the NL East. And guess what?
yep. And I mean, almost as satisfying as the Phils playoff runs in 2007 and 2008 was the Mets collapse.
Yeah.
And, so sorry, Hollywood. Um, but yeah, man, like Jimmy Rollins, absolutely the best shortstop that's ever played the game for the Phils. Um, Larry Bowa was good. Can't hold a candle to
No,
Jimmy
no.
Rollins.
J Roll, no way. I love Boa, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
And,
Kevin Stocker.
ooh, Kevin Stocker to me, and we'll get into these guys. Because for half a year he could fit that mold. Kevin Stocker, 324 in the second half of the 93 season.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, we'll get into that.
Yeah,
Let's stay on the 08.
Yeah.
Before we get a little, and we'll kind of skip around a little bit here, but we'll go back here. Ryan Howard, big piece.
Oh,
Um, and
heartbreaking.
here's another one that I distinctly recall because I had gone to game 4 of the um, divisional series against the Cardinals in 2011. Whatever year it was that he got hurt. Was it 11 that he got hurt, or was it 10?
It was 11.
11. I thought so. Okay. Because I remember it was the end of the run, basically.
Right.
And we were in St. Louis, and they lost, and I was like, no big deal, game 5, come back and it'll be all right. And man, end of that game was tough.
Yeah.
Tough to, the blowing the Achilles, running out the last play of the game. But you want to talk about somebody that could hit the ball, and you made great note of this here. He was the fastest player in baseball history, and we're talking baseball history here, like Babe Ruth, Bonds, Mantle.
Griffey.
Yeah, to hit 100 home runs and 200 home runs.
And actually 250 too. I forgot to put it in there, but he was the fastest to 250. He just beat out Ralph Kiner.
Wow. And it's again one of those that had he stayed healthy, oh man. And it took
And
him a long time to get back. But yeah, you wrote a note here. He just never, that to me, that was, and again, that was not the end of his Phillies career. But
no,
they ended that NLDS in game 5 against the Cardinals. He just wasn't himself after that.
no, he was a shell of himself. And the thing that pisses me off the most about it, with everybody jumping on him about his decline in play after that, number one, if we don't have Ryan Howard in 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, and 2011, we're not where we got to. Okay. That nice shiny trophy that we got in 2008, we don't got it. Okay. The other thing that people completely forget everything he did up to that point. And the other thing that they forget, or maybe they just don't know, is that he injured his ankle early in the season that year. I want to say it was in June, May or June. And he was so worried about letting his team down that instead of stopping playing, taking the appropriate amount of time off, and letting his ankle heal, he was getting cortisone injections into his heel and into his ankle all season long. Well, what does cortisone do to ligaments and tendons?
Yeah, it's
It
not
makes
good.
them brittle. So it's a direct result of him not wanting to let down his team and not wanting to be the guy that couldn't go. He pushed himself beyond the limits of what he should have done. And honestly, the medical staff should have stepped in and they should have protected him from himself in that situation. But at the end of the day, he pushed himself beyond his limits to try and will that team to victory. And it ended up costing him the rest of his career. And everybody wants to treat him like he's this or that. You know what, man? Ryan Howard was a damn warrior. And Ryan Howard deserves everybody's respect and everybody's adulation in that city for what he did. And the fact that there's still people out there that'll talk about him like he's a giant piece of crap pisses me off.
Oh yeah, no, and I completely agree. And here's the other thing too. Coming up, like he's the guy that replaced Jim Thome.
Right.
Jim Thome, like 600 home run guy, and you know, you just don't walk into the majors replacing somebody like that. He did,
Right.
and as you said, if he's not there, 07 through 11, we're not there. There's no World Series ring. There's no, for anyone to sit there and yeah, did I have my things with him when he was, weak swinging later at the, at the end of his Phillies run? Yeah, of course. But like, I was never ever the person to say, oh well, he's just garbage. Like, no, look, the man was hurt. It took him forever to even come back, and always a hero though.
Well, and some jerk off threw a beer bottle at him too.
Yeah, it's just
It
dumb
was it
stuff.
was absolutely ridiculous the amount of disrespect that he got, and I get it. Look, man, I shoot, I was calling for Nick Sirianni to be fired right off the bat, but he's started to turn things around. Ryan Howard had done so much more than Nick Sirianni will probably ever accomplish as the head coach of the Eagles, and people just gave him nothing. They gave him zero rope, and it was ridiculous. He's he's a corner piece of that team, and like I said, if they didn't have him, that none of it happens. So
Right.
get off my soapbox now.
All right. So, but let's again, let's stay on the '08 team. One more player here, because we could sit here and rattle them all off, I guess. But another one that I don't think doesn't quite get some of the disdain that Howard does, but I don't think he always gets his fair share necessarily. At least like an Utley would. Cole Hamels, and and not only that, like the guy was the World Series MVP
Right,
before players like Roy Halladay and Cliff Lee were even a Philly. So
right, right.
he was the guy. He was the ace, and yeah, I mean, again, one of those guys that he boy he had a heck of a run in Philly. And man, another one that I wish was one that would have stayed out the entire time.
Yes,
But
absolutely.
but again, and we'll talk about certain instances in terms of um, microcosms in time here, like just one instance or a year or whatever. But yeah, my goodness, his '08. Oof,
Oh yeah, dude. And
wow.
he, and yeah, 2009, he was a little bit, he wasn't quite what he was in 2008. Nobody was going to be what they were. No pitcher, if they had the year that Cole Hamels had in 2008, was going to come back and have exactly that same fire. Um, the amount of innings he pitched, the amount of pitches he threw, the lack of an off season that he had following the World Series. Um, there were so many mitigating factors, and he was definitely not the reason that they didn't repeat in 2009. He was one of the reasons they got back to the World Series.
Hmm.
Um, if I kind of, dude, I'm gonna be honest. I still hold a little grudge against Ruben Amaro not for not uniting Roy Halladay and Cliff Lee before, um, you know, for this World Series. We have Roy Halladay in that World Series. We're winning it.
Right.
And I
And
mean, because Cliff Lee, you want to talk about a cool player on the field. Like nothing got to him. Do you remember that catch he made on the liner that was right back to him?
oh yeah, like it was nothing.
Yeah.
Like,
Was it behind the back? Like,
yeah.
just ridiculous, man.
It's funny though, talking about these '08, and we would, here's another one we'd be remiss to say if we just thought about 2008. Don't think about 2009, but think about 2008. Who are we missing?
Brad Lidge.
That's it. That's
Yeah.
it.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Yeah, dude. Because we just went through October. I always go on Facebook and I look at my history. Like, what did I do? What stupid crap did I say on this day, however many years ago? And I came across one from after the World Series when we lost to the Yankees in 2009, and it said, um, "I'm gonna go on a baby punching spree, and it's all Brad Lidge's fault."
oh, that's good.
So,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, dude had a perfect 2008, like all the way through the postseason and everything. And then in 2009, again, he threw too many innings. I don't know what the deal was, but he was not the same pitcher. And but he got it. But without him, again, we don't have 2008. So as much as I didn't give him the same kind of leash that I gave to players like Ryan Howard and stuff, guys that grew up here in the system, maybe I could have given Brad Lidge a little bit more leeway, but
right. And
no.
I think if I remember correctly, 2008 was the funniest year. Again, I could be wrong in saying this. This is what I remember. Like you said, Brad Lidge made it perfectly through '08, right? I believe he blew one save, and that was the All-Star game.
You know what? I didn't even think about that.
I think that's what it was. I think he was perfect in the regular season. He was perfect in the postseason, and the one game he blew was the All-Star game.
Get out.
I'm pretty certain. I'm not entirely on that, but yeah, and then he had a 7-something ERA in '09, which is crazy, and they still made the World Series.
Yeah.
But anyway, all right. But talk about I kind of frame that in the sense to try to move on to our next player here, who had nothing to do with '08 and certainly not much of the run. But when the Phillies were down in the early zeros, how do you say that? Is that it?
The early aughts.
Ugh.
Yeah,
Ugh.
no. We'll call it the early 2000s.
So you talk about a play that makes you forever endeared in Philadelphia. And you talk about a player running into a wall, breaking his nose, and bleeding everywhere, and still catching the ball.
Yeah. It was awesome.
Aaron Rowand.
It was absolutely awesome, man.
That's a guy that will ever just walk into a bar in that area. Here's a drink. Here's a beer.
Yeah.
Has to. I can't see how he couldn't.
I kind of want to send him a 6-pack right now.
Exactly. You have a good comment here. Because here's someone we could have mentioned on the last episode.
Yeah.
He was the anti-Ricky Waters.
Yes. So Ricky Waters. So in '93, we were playing against or was it 90? No, it couldn't have been 93. It was a game we were playing against the Seahawks. And so maybe 90, maybe closer to 97. And anyway, the pass was coming to him. He short armed the pass. Eagles were getting blown out by the Seahawks. He short arms a pass. And in the press conference afterwards, the reporter asked him, "What happened on that play? Why didn't you do that? Or why would you short arm that pass?" And his answer was, "For who? For what?" And then when Aaron Rowand was asked after the game why he did what he did, his answer was, "For who? My teammates. For what? To win the game."
I love it.
And
absolutely love it.
That's one of the greatest sound bites in Philadelphia sports history.
I absolutely love it. Yeah, he was unfortunately in a time where Philly was very down, not a whole lot of winning going on. But my goodness, did he play like they were contending for something?
Absolutely.
um,
Oh,
you
absolutely.
know, they were unfortunately at the time essentially contending for the basement. I hate to say that, but that's just what it was. You had a bunch of young talent around him that was starting to come into their own, and you could certainly say that plays like that may have sparked something. Like, wow, maybe maybe we got something here down the road. They
Right.
did. But my goodness, yeah, that if talk about just one play that really makes, and the funny thing is with him, kind of completely different from everyone else we've talked about so far, was that he really wasn't in Philly that long.
No.
I would say of all the people we've talked about, he's by far the least. So, because of what, uh, 3 seasons, maybe
Yeah, if that, because he came from Chicago and
two
then
two seasons, 2 seasons. He was 06, 07. So,
so all right, so he was on the first playoff team.
hmm
Okay.
yeah, he was an
Yeah.
all star in 07. I thought for some reason I thought 05, 06.
Yeah, that's I was thinking
Um,
earlier. Like I was thinking 04, somewhere between 04 and 06.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I just think he was like the spark that led to, you know, um, better times. That 06 Phillies team was still not, you know, they were above 500 and they finished second, but uh, the problem was the Mets were really, really good
Right.
in
Well, that
06.
was the so that was the year when I don't remember. I remember being super pissed at them for falling short, and I want to say it was something that had to do at the beginning of the season. I feel like they just sucked for like the first 2 months of the season, and then turned it on towards the end. And I remember being so pissed because they're like, "Well, we only missed the playoffs by 2 games or whatever." And we fought right to the end. And my mentality was, if you would have fought in the beginning, you would have made the playoffs. But little did I know that was the start of one of the best era of Phillies baseball, of our well of Phillies baseball overall.
Yeah, and I for some reason I'd thought, because he seems so separate of that whole era. He really does.
Yeah,
I thought 05, 06 maybe. But yeah, no, it was 06, 07. So that's funny. So yeah, maybe my memory's failing. But
like
no,
my
he
computer.
just yeah, there you go. No, fits the mold as an all-time hero. And I think here's the thing with him though, and maybe the reason why the connection's not made. One, he didn't win the ring with Phillies. Um, ends up winning it with the Giants, but doesn't win it with the Phillies. So if that connection's not there, the other thing too is that he's forever connected with breaking his nose.
Yep.
Now you can, for better or worse, I mean that's what we remember him for, is the hard play. So, but I think again, as I said, I think that was a spark around everyone else to be like, maybe we're into something here. So, all right, let's move on though from him. We kind of did a lot on the '08 Phillies, and we'll probably do another episode where we talk about some of the and other players, or people we mentioned here. But '93, and my goodness, you threw some names down here, and we could just run through that whole roster basically outside of a couple names.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, go ahead, man. Who you got?
So yeah, so I mean, my big three with that team was Dutch. So Darren Dalton, John Kruk, and Lenny Dykstra. They were the leaders. It was clear that they were the leaders. And Darren Dalton had struggled for so many years in Philly. People forget that he started with the team, I want to say in 85, 80, 84, 85, somewhere in that vicinity. And so he was getting towards the middle to end of his career, because he ended up going to the Marlins after he left the Phillies, and then retiring, I think, after 97 season. But he was always a Philly. John Kruk came over from San Diego, and dude, you want to picture what people thought of the Phillies uh, and that team? John Kruk,
Yeah,
old Johnny
yep.
One Nut. Um, and then Lenny Dykstra and his giant frickin' tobacco puddle out in the middle of center field. Um, it was such a cool team. It was nobody expected it. Although I will say this, and I'll stand by this to my dying day. After we swept the Astros to start the season, I called that we were going to the World Series.
No
So,
kidding.
yeah. Now,
You
I
know,
think the only other person who knows that, and they probably don't remember it, is I can't remember if it was my mom or my dad that I said it to, but they probably laughed it off. So, you're so dumb. But but I said that when they swept the Astros to start that season. I was like, nope, they're going to the World Series.
yeah, by far and I, it's funny I even say this, as much as I will always love the '08 team and cherish our World Series win there in our lifetime. Um, 93, man, my goodness. And it's funny because I sit there and I remember playing some online simulators through like What If Sports. You remember that?
Yeah.
And I would sit there and routinely play out like the 27 Yankees versus the 93 Phillies because I thought they were that good. Like they're going to
How'd
beat
that
them.
work out?
Yeah, the 27 Yankees generally win, but every once in a while the Phillies win that one. And I but it's because of players like Dykstra, and you have this really ragtag bunch of nobodies. Um, they didn't deserve to win anything,
No.
but they were 32 games above 500. 32. 97 and 65 to finish out the regular season. They had absolutely no business being where they were at. Um, they just were not a team that was built like anyone else. The Braves had run roughshod through the NL East for a long time at that point,
Yeah.
and the Phillies were just like, "Hey,
The Phillies, the thing with the Phillies was that team in particular. You look at who they had: Pete Incaviglia, right? They had Jim Eisenreich, who we both talked about. He was he's a personal favorite for both of us. Where I had the good fortune to meet him, and he was super nice. They had Terry Mulholland. They had Kevin Stocker, Ricky Jordan, Kim Batiste. All these players that nobody expected anything out of. I don't think anybody picked them to have a winning record that season because they hadn't had a winning record for years at that point. Probably since '83 when they went to the last time they had gone to the World Series.
yeah, no." And the crazy thing too, really thinking about, a good amount of the players that they had were, for better or worse, outside of like Dykstra, or maybe Dalton. Generally, everyone else was kind of an afterthought,
Right.
And here's the funniest thing to me: who's on that team as a backup outfielder? Ruben friggin' Amaro,
Oh my God. Yeah. I
Junior, not the
Yeah,
dad.
not his dad. His dad was good. Ruben Amaro Jr., or as I like to call him, Ruin Tomorrow Jr.
Yeah,
Or Rube the Boob. Dude, he sucks so bad, and the fact that he's tied to, I'm pretty sure the reason that Mitch Williams threw that bad pitch was because Ruben Amaro Jr. was on that team, and he didn't want him to win a World Series.
that's that. Yeah, you answered the question.
Like, he didn't deserve to win a World Series, and God, I'm not gonna do. We're not doing Negadelphia. I'm not gonna talk about Ruben
No,
Amaro
no, no.
anymore. Um, I'm gonna say one guy that I really wish would have made it to be on that team, because his Jerry curl was on point, was Steve Jeltz.
Yes, yes.
Um,
Nah, now
but no,
I
no,
saw it.
Steve Jeltz. I'm glad he wasn't on that team because he would have just people would have slipped in the freaking locker room in his Jerry curl activator and cracked their heads, and we wouldn't have had a team.
Yeah, no, I saw your note, man. That that always gets me. Um Steve Jobs, to me is the best. But no, but it's funny, looking at people like him though were unfortunately who we had before the good time started. So
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
might joke on him, but he was really it. um, all right, I think we'll put the pause on baseball there. I think that ends our baseball players on this one.
Yes.
Um, and before we'll dive back into the Eagles, but we'll talk about one more non-Eagle here, and I know one of your favorites, Wayne Simmons.
Yeah. So here's the thing. This current, group of Flyers, there were some players that could have been, on this list. But due to different reasons, they're not. One of them being Mike Richards. One of them being Jeff Carter, who now plays for the Penguins. Mike Richards is out of the league. But there was a while where Mike Richards looked like he was going to be the next Lindros, as far as the next guy that the team builds around. And, Jeff Carter was going to be his John LeClaire. And unfortunately, you know, it just didn't happen. And those two guys liked hanging out in Old City more than they liked, doing what they needed to do on the ice. Between Old City and Seattle, you could always find them somewhere drinking in one of those two places. Well, leading up to I forget which year it was, but it was when they had gotten Claude Giroux, who's the current captain and could deservedly be on this list. He doesn't get as much love or as much respect as he deserves. But in that offseason, they traded at the draft with made a couple trades that changed the face of the franchise. They brought in Jake Voracek from Columbus, and they traded for Braden Shen, the rights to pick Braden Shen. They traded for Sean Couturier, the rights to pick Sean Couturier, who is another fixture of the Flyers franchise. And one of the players they got in return was a guy named Wayne Simmons. And so I was like, man, I couldn't believe they traded with Mike Richards. He was one of my favorites. Jeff Carter, I was okay with because of the return we got. But I was really upset about I was really upset about Mike Richards. And then I started looking up video of this guy, Wayne Simmons, that we brought in. And I was like, wow, wait a second. This dude can play. And this dude's got he's got some Philly in him, because I'm watching him play, and he hadn't played a whole lot for the Kings, but I was watching different clips, and that he could hit, and he had shown that he could score some goals. And so I was like, all right, so let's see where this goes. Flash forward to the end of his Flyers career, and I didn't want to see him go, because Wayne Simmons is another heart and soul, heart on his sleeve, just absolute beast of a warrior. Played every shift like it was going to be his last, and he was great, man. And he was great on and off the ice. He was good in the community. He did a lot of good work, and it just sucks that he didn't get to finish out his career here. He was not the player at the end of his career due to injuries again. You see that crop up.
Right.
Not the player that he was at the start, but man, he was a good dude. He's still playing. He's pretty sure he just signed with Toronto. I can't remember.
Yeah, he's with Toronto, 2-year deal.
So, he's a good dude. I'm glad that he played for, that's the thing. There's so many Flyers players that are still playing and have recently left the team that we could have added to this list too, but we were trying to just keep it somewhat trimmed down for the podcast. Guys like Scotty Hartnell, Jake Voracek, who just left town, like I said, Claude Giroux, Sean Couturier. These dudes are just killers, and it's awesome to have them, and I'm glad that we have them. And hopefully they, Giroux his contract's running up. He's the current captain, but he's playing out his deal. Hopefully he's back and finishes his career as a Flyer. Sean Couturier is still young and locked up, so we have a good chance to keep him. But yeah, man, Wayne Simmons was the dude.
So let's wrap this up with some Eagles. We've got a few more here, and this isn't like a definitive list. We'll
No,
probably end up doing a round two, and and
dude, we could
and
probably
and
do up to like around 10 on this one.
yeah, exactly. So we're gonna finish off with some Eagles, and obviously these are ones that are gonna forever endear themselves. I'll try to go no order here, but let's throw out one of these that you've already talked about. Gosh, I can't remember when we were talking about it. It was early in the podcast, but Brian Westbrook.
Yes.
Talk about somebody that really fit the mold, hard nosed, and just a solid player. I mean, who doesn't love Brian Westbrook?
Right. And he's still to this day, you see him, he's posting stuff about the Eagles, he's posting breakdowns. He posted something the other day about his kid saying Dallas sucks. He was just a great player. And even before, I gotta mention him because I kind of always picture the two together. We gotta mention Deuce in this
Mm-hmm.
in this too, because Deuce Staley was here first, and he was kind of the thunder to Brian Westbrook's lightning. And I mean, Deuce again, he was a little dude, but he would run through a wall. And it really sucks that he's not somehow on this coaching staff. I still kind of feel like he got screwed out of the head coach job. But between Deuce and Brian Westbrook, man, we had some awesome running backs in the early 2000s, and it's a shame that they didn't get their Super Bowl rings with us. Pretty sure Deuce was on the Steelers team when they won theirs. But great backs, and definitely all-time Eagles. And I with Deuce, I never had a Deuce Staley jersey, but my little brother got one for Christmas one year, and I was jealous of that. I tried to steal it. But I have a Westbrook jersey, and it's one that I can throw in from time to time. It's getting a little small. Something happened with my washing or washer and dryer, and it shrank a lot of my clothes, like a whole lot. It's definitely not because I got fat. And so, that one's a little tight, but we could break it out here and there.
Yeah, and the crazy thing with him too, shorter career, only played 9 seasons, 8 with the Eagles, but again, one of those that and really, if you really look at him overall, he just had such a nice little window of consistency that outside of really his last year in Philly, but again, typical of many running backs where they start breaking when they hit 30, which is unfortunate. He was just the guy, ran us through the 2000s, no problem. Was able to enjoy some success, with us, and I think he's certainly fits the mold of these players that we've been talking about as forever heroes.
Oh yeah, he played his college ball at Villanova too. So
yeah, exactly.
Been in the area for a while. I think he's from Maryland, but we won't hold that against him.
All right, another one here, and we'll let's do QB Eagles.
Okay, all right. So, dude, Randall Cunningham, quarterback Eagles. For those of you who play Tecmo Super Bowl, my biggest thing with Randall will always be the early injuries and the fact that his quarterback's coach died. And this is something that I didn't really know because it all happened when we were kids, man, like little kids. And we didn't really know this stuff, but my dad, was obviously an adult during that time and would tell me about it. And because we would talk about Randall and talk about, especially when Chip Kelly was the coach and that offense, and talk about, man, what if we had Randall Cunningham in his prime in that offense? And come to find out that part of the reason that Randall took so long to progress to where he wasn't really a pocket quarterback or a great passer until he was with Minnesota, which was towards the end of his career.
Right.
And part of the reason for that was because he had Buddy Ryan as his head coach, and his quarterback's coach died. Like he had this quarterback coach that the Eagles brought in because he coached him up from high school to college and then into the pros. And then dude died, and he was like a second father to Randall, and that screwed him up. And then Buddy's not an offensive guy. Buddy's a defensive guy. Buddy's offensive coordinator. If you want to know what kind of offensive mind Buddy Ryan had, Buddy's offensive coordinator was a guy we talked about last week, Rich Kotite. So that should tell you what kind of offensive mind Buddy Ryan has. He had no idea what the hell to do with Randall Cunningham. He just knew he had this big dude that was fast, that could run, he had a cannon for an arm. So he just went out and told him to do whatever he wanted to do. And it worked to a point. But that's why between that and Buddy's penchant for turning defensive linemen into offensive linemen, because why find offensive linemen when you can use guys from a defense? That was literally where half the Eagles offensive line came from in the late 80s.
Right.
Was converted defensive linemen. So again, shows you what kind of offensive mind Buddy Ryan had. Randall didn't really stand as at all of the success he had in Philly was sheer talent. It was just absolutely sheer talent. And the shame is we never got to see what he could have been if he would have been properly developed.
Oh yeah, no, and the funny thing too, I'm looking at his career stats, and some interesting things of note with him. He ended up in Dallas. He ended his career in Baltimore. The funny thing with him, he's a Pro Bowler 3 times with the Eagles, 88, 89, and 90. Doesn't make it again until 98. And by that point, he's a completely different quarterback.
Right.
Because at that point, he's not running as much. It's obviously way more in the arm. That year was his most through the air, or second most through the air. He really, with the Eagles, that was his ground game. Was he could run the ball. He had several years where he led the league in rushing yards as a quarterback. Of course, not like you would see things now with like Jalen Hurts or people like that. But
right,
but for the time, it was pretty dynamic. But yeah, it completely becomes a different quarterback when he gets out of Philly. And yeah, just like you said, kind of revitalize the career a little bit, and yeah, it would have been interesting to see who he would have been with, as you said, not Rich Kotite.
Yes. With a competent or even halfway competent offensive coordinator.
And head coach too, because Randall's there with us till 95.
Right.
So yeah. All right. In that same genre, let's stay in that. We'll stay in the time frame. Then we'll finish it off with somebody special. Reggie White. We have on Reggie White,
the Minister of Defense. So Reggie White, and again, you can say different people. You can say Bruce Smith. You can say Michael Strahan. You're wrong if you say Michael Strahan. But so many defensive ends that have been great that have come through this league. Charles Haley. Reggie White, for my money, is the greatest defensive end of all time. Played inside, played outside. He could line up a nose tackle. And no matter where he lined up, though, he had to be accounted for. And he was accounted for with 2 players at least, sometimes 3. So that one dude on your defensive line is freeing up the rest of your rushers, which you saw with Clyde Simmons, which you saw with Mike Pitts, which you saw with Mike Golick, all these guys that were able to just decimate quarterbacks and decimate running backs and lead the 1991 Philadelphia Eagles defense to be the first and I believe only defense to ever lead the league in lowest rushing yards allowed, lowest passing yards allowed, and lowest points allowed in a season. It was incredible watching him play. it was extremely sad that he did not finish his career as an Eagle. Um, he was the unfortunate victim of cheapskate Norman Brayman, who, for those of you who don't know, was the owner of the Eagles before Jeffrey Lurie. And he's a car dealer mogul from Miami. So, he didn't give a crap about the Eagles. He bought them as a portfolio enhancement, and that's all they ever were to him. He didn't give a crap. That's why he didn't spend money in free agency, and that's why after Buddy left, when he fired Buddy because Buddy insulted him, and then free agency became a real thing in the NFL, and then everybody left to go play for Buddy, or in Reggie's case, Reggie went to Green Bay and won Super Bowls. Um, you know, that is what it is, and it's just a shame that Reggie didn't. I'm glad Reggie left because he got to win a Super Bowl. I just wish he would have. I wish the teams that he played on here with those great defenses would have actually had an offense that could have backed them up,
Yeah.
because they deserved to win a Super Bowl.
Right. Yeah. And that's the one thing that I always think about with those early 90s, late 80s, early 90s Eagles teams. Defense was absolutely killer. And you can attribute that to obviously the people they brought in, the people they drafted. Um, Buddy Ryan, obviously one of the most defensive minded, wizards of the game. And again, we just talked about Randall Cunningham too. But the offense there's no one there. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love my Calvin Williams and Fred Barnett, but
Right.
not getting the job done.
Right.
It is what it is. I mean, and we could talk about people that should have never left. Talk about offensively, Keith Jackson.
Exactly. You know what? You picked my mind. I was just going to say Keith Jackson. When your best running backs are Heath Sherman and Keith Byers, you might have a problem offensively.
Yeah. I mean, you have some pieces there. Don't get me wrong. But you end up letting some of your higher tiered offensive talent go. What if they stay?
Right.
What if Chris Carter stays? What if Keith Jackson stays? And I'm talking about over time.
Right.
That team could be, Dallas that could have been the Dallas team with Michael Irvin and the Emmitt Smith of the early 90s there, that man,
the only
through and,
the only thing I'll disagree with you on is Chris Carter, because Chris Carter absolutely needed to be cut in order to save his life, because he was so addicted to drugs at that point.
Oh yeah. I'm just talking about his talent.
But yeah,
what he ended up becoming.
Yeah, if they could have figured out a way to get him straight and keep him in Philly, it could have. That team could have been incredible.
Yeah. I'm talking strictly on talent and on terms of statistically looking at that way. No, I certainly agree with you there. That certainly was in his best interest. But yeah, you had some pieces there, but just not a whole lot going on offensively, unfortunately. And of course, then at the time that Buddy Ryan's out, you're stuck with Rich Kotite, which we've done due diligence with already. So
yeah. So let's
more player.
The last one on our list, and for this episode at least, is the man who nobody expected to do anything, really. I think when he was signed, people joked about it. I thought it was a solid move, but I was a little biased because I had his jersey. It's not still hanging up in my closet. I'll admit it's not still there. It's put away. But Nick Foles,
Philly special,
Saint Nick.
Yeah, he's another. It's funny. Would he be the anti-Mark Sanchez?
I think he would.
Again, but we talked about certain things like Aaron Rowand and maybe like 08 Cole Hamels and certain things that we've kind of mentioned throughout this episode of it. Maybe it takes a year, or maybe it takes a play, or just one thing that will forever endear you to the fan base. And yeah, you win a Super Bowl, you win Super Bowl MVP. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
that's
gonna do
gonna do
that.
it.
You're gonna
That'll
do
do it.
that.
I mean, and there's so much, dude. Nick Foles' history with the Eagles is so weird because you look at it. He came in his rookie year and didn't do anything. His second year, he bumps his head. Well, actually, I won't say he didn't do anything because I was at the game in Tampa which was Andy Reid's last year, where he ends up throwing a touchdown pass to Jeremy Maclin, like game-winning touchdown pass at the very end of the game. The Eagles win, which was glorious. But he doesn't really do much. And then the next season, he bumps his head, he gets a concussion, and he wakes up and thinks he's Peyton Manning. And he throws 7 touchdowns against the Raiders. And he ends up finishing the season with 27 touchdowns and 2 interceptions.
Which is still his best season by far.
Right.
Overall.
Right. So then the season after that, he's playing and he's not doing well. And then he gets hurt. And then in that off season, he gets traded for for Sam Bradford.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
That was a change of scenery trade, basically.
Yeah. So we end up giving up Foles and a pick to get Sam Bradford. And then he plays for the Rams. Doesn't work out that season. He ends up playing the next season. The next season after that is when the Rams draft Jared Goff, and Nick Foles goes to Kansas City, and he's a backup in Kansas City. And then he's contemplating retirement when the Eagles have just played their first season with Carson Wentz, and they need a backup because Chase Daniels was friggin' god awful. And so they talk him out of retirement, and he comes back thinking, all right, this is good. I've been in Philly before. I know how it is. And so he's with Philly. Doug Peterson was one of the coaches in Kansas City. So he's familiar with everything. He's familiar with the system. And then the Eagles start off and they're playing probably the best football that we've ever seen an Eagles team play. And we go to LA and Carson gets hurt. And all of a sudden everybody just is depressed. I know I was. And we're just thinking, you know what, the season's over. Doesn't matter. Everything's over, blah, 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 blah. And Nick Foles comes in, and Nick Foles plays competently, but not great, and doesn't give us a whole hell of a lot of confidence going into the playoffs. But we've still locked up. He does enough to lock up the first round bye and home field throughout, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I succinctly remember people wanting, who was the backup? Who was the backup?
Nate Sudfeld.
Nate Sudfeld. That's right. So people wanted Nate Sudfeld to play in the playoffs. They wanted him to start. And, one of the biggest issues was that Raiders game where it was like, what did it end up being, like 7-3 or something like that on Christmas or Christmas Eve. It was a god awful game. It sucked so bad. We won, but it was friggin' bad. So we go into the playoffs with Nick Foles and pulls off a miracle of all miracles, and we win the Super Bowl. And not only do we win the Super Bowl, but he outduels Tom Brady.
That's it.
In the Super Bowl.
That's it. I talk about these one-time things, Super Bowl MVP, Philly special, and you really wrap your head around. He outdueled Mr. Super Bowl rings himself, Tom friggin' Brady. Nick friggin' Foles.
Yeah.
Yeah, talk about somebody that you're always gonna, I don't know, buy a beer for. Oh, my goodness, it doesn't really. I mean, and it's weird. He's the weirdest person on this list to me. He
Yeah,
really is. He's not Brian Dawkins. He's not Reggie White. He's not Chase Utley. He's not Jason Kelsey. He doesn't have that vibrant, boisterous, run into the wall, Aaron Rowan attitude. He doesn't
no,
at all.
no,
It's like, and I don't mean to sound ill of anybody, but it's like they picked the geek from youth group at church and said, "You're going to play quarterback," and the guy wins us a Super Bowl.
dude. And the
So you
funniest thing
can't
is,
not love him then.
no, no, absolutely. And the funniest thing is, he, like, his dad was a football coach. He used to get helicoptered to games. Like, he was definitely, you know, he definitely is a different dude. He's not what you would expect, but he was the man. And then the next season, Carson gets hurt again and he steps in, and the team wasn't playing that well. Carson shouldn't have come back when he came back, honestly. I think if he doesn't come back when he comes back, this whole narrative has changed a little bit, but he was feeling the pressure because the backup quarterback just won a Super Bowl in Philly. And there's a statue of him outside the stadium now. And so Carson felt like he needed to take back the team. He comes back too early, gets hurt again, can't play. Nick Foles comes in, leads them to the playoffs, and then comes very close to going back to the NFC Championship game, if not for an ill-timed drop by Alshon Jeffrey.
Alshon.
You know?
Yeah, and it's wild to me, and and the crazy thing is, look, he's still young, he's 32. And here's the insane thing about Foles. The insane thing to me, he has never started more than 11 games in a season. That was with St. Louis. He never started more than 10 games with us, which is even crazier to think about.
Right.
In a season, when I say that. He hasn't played this year. It's wild. It really is, because he's what, third stringer right now on the Bears, or what's he
Yeah.
still doing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the craziness to it is, after the 2018 season and after those playoffs, Nick Foles wants out. He doesn't want to be the backup. So he gets released. He goes to Jacksonville, signs on to be the starting quarterback, the number one guy.
Yeah.
And then he breaks his collarbone, and Gardner Minshew steps in, and Gardner Minshew lights it up.
Yeah.
So then,
and now where's Minshew at?
right. So then they trade Nick Foles to the Bears, where he ends up playing not well and gets hurt again. And now he's the third stringer because they've got other people there. And Gardner Minshew, who was the guy that took over for him in Jacksonville, is now the Eagles' backup quarterback. And the guy that Nick Foles was backing up, Carson Wentz, is now in Indianapolis because the Eagles drafted a quarterback in the second round to take Nick Foles' place.
It's the weirdest thing.
It just, the quarterback shuffle that happened is just ridiculous. And now, we're not even sure if Jalen Hurts will be here next year, or if he'll be the guy, or, there's all kinds of rumors. There's talk about trading for Russell Wilson. Thank God the trading for Aaron Rodgers and Deshaun Watson has gone away. I do not want Deshaun Watson. I don't want Tua. I don't want Rodgers.
No, I don't want, and don't get me wrong. I really respect the world out of Tua. I think he's a good talent. But the other three guys, I'm sorry, but I don't like Russell Wilson. I'm not saying that he's not a winner, but he's not someone I want to move us into the future.
Right.
And quite frankly, I don't want anything to do with Deshaun Watson.
No.
I also don't want anything to do with Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that because of like whatever. I'm just saying that the guys, and again, I don't mean to be an ageist. That's because freaking Tom Brady said he'll play to 55, and he's obviously what 44 and still figuring it out.
Right.
But Rodgers is on the other side of what most NFL players age wise. I mean, what is he going to give you? And
Right.
granted, yeah, the guys. To me, it's like, oh, let's bring in Ben Roethlisberger. Like, no,
Exactly.
look. These guys are great quarterbacks. I'm not taking that from them, but I don't want that to move us into the future. You
Right.
know, I want to stick with either, hey, let's see what Hertz has for us, or if you're going to make a move, try to make a move and sink your eggs into somebody that's like maybe not 37 years old. I don't know. That's just
Right.
me.
Right. No, I
Yeah.
agree 100%. If Deshaun Watson didn't have all of the issues swirling around him legally, um, and we knew that he wasn't a scumbag, and not saying that he is a scumbag, but where there's smoke, there's fire, and there seems to be a lot pointing to him being a scumbag. Then maybe I would want him on my team
Right.
because he's the
Exactly.
youngest of them. But I'm not trying to trade draft picks. Although then again, with Howie Roseman making the picks, maybe we should just trade them all for a new team bus that might get more use. But no, I mean, I just want to see the team build, and I'm starting to get more and more sold on Jalen Hurts, which is weird considering his passing has kind of not been great as of late. But I'm just seeing stuff out of him that has given me more confidence. Um, like the second half of the game that they just played um, against the Chargers, kind of opened my eyes a little bit to maybe him being the dude. So we'll see.
Yeah.
It's going to be
Yeah.
interesting.
Look,
Obviously they don't give a damn what we say anyway.
would I love to have a Mahomes, or would I love to have, any one of that ilk? Of course. But I want to see what we have with Jalen Hurts. And I've said that before on here. I really think that, he's going to come into his own. Um, I think my only issue with him is that if you down the road him, he needs to develop into, and watching the game last night, Bears and Steelers, and just watching Justin Fields air it out a couple times. I want to see Hurts like develop into that. Just strong arm it, and really be smart about your downfield plays, and not have to rely on yourself so much, because
Right.
eventually that's going to slow down. I just want to see him develop into, an all around, great quarterback. And if I could get somebody that's passing for 4,000 yards and running for near 500, my goodness, I'm there, and
Right.
I don't know that that's Jalen Hurts, but maybe we get there with him.
Well, we've got nothing but time to find out.
That's right. So this has been fun, man. I
Yeah.
love doing these kind of look backs at some of these heroes of ours, and we love Philly sports, so we're gonna hit that from time to time. Let's plan to do something else though. We've kind of done sports to death. I don't have anything in mind, but do you have anything in mind?
No, we'll have to come up with something unless somebody visits us at doublewidecoffin.com and drops us a suggestion or hits us
Yeah,
up on
yeah.
Twitter and lets us know, or even on Facebook.
Although it is coming up to be the holiday season, so we could do something Thanksgiving related. Maybe we'll figure something out. Or
I definitely
Christmas is
thought
coming up.
I definitely thought you were going to say we will be doing a sale on double wide coffins.
Oh, that's true too. Black Friday sale, doublewidecoffin.com.
Yeah, it's we'll give you one double wide coffin for one PlayStation 5.
There you go. Yeah, we could do a Black Friday episode on how we don't get anything we want.
We should do a Black Friday episode on us failing to get PlayStations.
Uh,
Well,
so
on
what did
that
you end up?
note, we're
Yeah.
back to Negadelphia.
All right. All right. Back. Yes. Back in the face. We're back.
So until next
Uh,
time, we have been the Noise Brigade. You have been our listeners, and we will see you next time.